Decoding the unspoken subtext. Have you ever been in the middle of a routine conversation, maybe with a colleague, a spouse, or a patient, and suddenly felt the air in the room shift? On the surface, the words being spoken are completely normal. But underneath, you can tell the other person is suddenly following an entirely different script. The tone goes sharp, or they completely shut down, or they become strangely defensive. You realize there's an unspoken subtext, but you have no idea what it actually is. When a conversation derails like this, it's incredibly frustrating. You feel misunderstood, they feel defensive, and the actual purpose of the talk gets completely lost. Today, I want to give you a diagnostic toolkit. We're going to look at 3 psychological lenses that let you look beneath the surface of a glitching conversation. Figure out exactly what script the other person is reading from, and most importantly, how to pivot the discussion to make them feel safe enough to come back to reality. Paradigm 1. Transactional analysis, the ego states. Let's start with the first lens, transactional analysis. This looks at the literal tone and roles people inhabit when they speak. According to this framework, we all operate from one of 3 ego states at any given time: the parent, the adult, and the child. The adult is objective, rational, and deals with the present facts. This is where productive conversations happen. The parent copies the behaviors and attitudes of authority figures. It can be nurturing, but it can also be critical, scolding, judging, or laying down absolute rules. The child operates from the emotions and reactions we had when we were young. It can be free and creative, but when triggered, it becomes the rebellious or adaptive child, feeling small, defensive, or defiant. A conversation works beautifully when it's adult to adult. You ask a factual question, they give you a factual answer. The subtext happens when we hit what's called a crossed transaction. Imagine you ask a colleague, "Do you know when that report will be ready?" That's an adult to adult question. But if they turn to you with a sharp edge and say, "I'm doing the best that I can, you don't need to micromanage me," they have just dropped into the defiant child state, and they are treating you like a critical parent. They are no longer responding to your actual words, they are responding to an imaginary authority figure. If you snap back with, "Well, it is past the deadline," you've just accepted their script and stepped right into that critical parent role. The adult conversation is dead. Paradigm 2. The Karpman drama triangle, the game. If transactional analysis tells us the tone of the script, our second lens tells us the plot of the game. This is the Karpman drama triangle. When a conversation feels like a trap, it's usually because the other person is trying to cast both of you into one of 3 rigid roles: the victim, the persecutor, or the rescuer. The victim feels helpless and blameless. "Why does this always happen to me? Nothing I do works." The persecutor is the bad guy, the oppressor, the one causing the problem. The rescuer is the hero who swoops in to solve it, but often keeping the victim dependent on them. The subtext in a drama triangle conversation is almost always an unwritten invitation. If someone comes to you acting entirely helpless about a problem they could easily solve themselves, they are inviting you to be the rescuer. But here is the danger of the triangle. The roles always rotate. If you try to give them objective, adult advice, they might suddenly view your advice as criticism. In a flash, they flip from victim to persecutor, and suddenly you are cast as the cruel oppressor If you've ever thought, I was just trying to help, how did I become the bad guy? You were caught in the drama triangle. Paradigm 3, schema modes, the emotional defense. Now, sometimes a conversation goes off the rails and it doesn't quite fit a role or a game. It just feels incredibly heavy. The reaction is completely disproportionate to reality. That brings us to our third lens, schema modes, which come from schema therapy. Think of this as a person's ultimate primitive defense mechanism. When someone feels emotionally threatened or deeply insecure, an old childhood wound gets triggered, and they instantly default to a rigid coping style to protect themselves. There are 3 classic ways this looks in everyday communication. The detached protector. They completely shut down. They offer flat, one-word responses, look away, or become overly intellectual. The unspoken subtext here is a fortress wall. If I don't let you close, you can't hurt me or judge me. Overcompensation, the counterattack. They feel exposed, so they go on the offensive. They become dominating, aggressive, or hypercritical of you. The subtext is a preemptive strike. I'll attack you before you can find a flaw in me. Compliant surrender. This is the sneakiest one. They nod, they agree, they say yes, whatever you think is best, but the subtext is dripping with unexpressed resentment and helplessness. They are submitting because they feel they have no voice, but they are withdrawing their true self from the conversation entirely. The solution: how to de-escalate and pivot. So you're in a conversation, you notice the shift, and using your new toolkit, you diagnose it. You realize, they've dropped into a child state, or they are casting me as the persecutor, or they've put up the wall of a detached protector. What do you do? The worst thing you can do is call it out directly. If you say, you're being defensive, or stop acting like a victim, you will instantly supercharge their insecurity and cement them into that script. Instead, your goal is to change the environment, to make them feel safe without blaming them or pointing out their reaction. You want to step completely off their stage and refuse to play the role they've written for you. Here is how you do that tactfully and compassionately. First, acknowledge their reality without validating the distortion. Use softening phrases that lower the emotional temperature. You can say something like, I want to pause for a second because I feel like I might have come across the wrong way, and that's entirely on me. Notice what that does. It takes the blame off them. It doesn't criticize their ability to understand. It opens an escape hatch for their ego. Second, explicitly state your positive intent. When people get defensive, it's because they assume your intent is hostile. Reassure them. My only goal here is to make sure we're on the same page so we can make this project succeed together. I'm completely on your team. By refusing to be the critical parent or the persecutor, you break the circuit. You invite them back into an adult-to-adult safe space. It takes practice to pause your own emotional reactions long enough to see these dynamics clearly. But when you start using these techniques, a remarkable thing happens. Instead of getting angry or confused by someone's unexpected behavior, you begin to understand why they are doing it. It tells you a great deal about what makes them feel insecure or unsafe. By recognizing the script, figuring out the underlying issue, and pivoting with tact and compassion, you don't just save the conversation, you build a bridge. You ensure that your conversation partner feels safe. You ensure that you feel genuinely understood, and ultimately, you achieve the real purpose of the conversation. Thanks for watching. Try this out in your next tricky conversation, and let me know how it goes in the comments below. See you next time.